So, since this year's summer reading has the theme mythology, I thought I would share a myth with you. This is the Judgment of Paris, and it's the story that leads up to the very famous Trojan War. So, if you ever wondered how that all got started and how the Odyssey got started, here's your answer. And it goes like this. It all began with Poseidon getting married again. He already had a dozen odd wives, but here we go with another one. And all the gods and goddesses were invited to this wedding, of course. And they were all in a tizzy about it. It was going to be the social event of the century. And they were all going to have a wonderful time. Well, all except for Eris. Now, Eris, you understand, is the goddess of fighting and discord and arguing and not getting along with people. And of course, who wants the goddess of argument and discord and not getting along with people at your wedding, right? So naturally, she was not invited, and oh, Eris was upset. And she paced around and gnawed on her fingers while she watched Aphrodite decide how she was going to wear her hair, and watched Athene pick out just the most perfect suit of armor, and Hera pick out her gown, and oh, she got madder and madder and madder. And when the day of the wedding came, Iris, the goddess of the rainbow, flung out a rainbow so all the gods and goddesses could slide one by one down the rainbow to Poseidon's palace under the sea, leaving Eris all alone up on Mount Olympus. And finally, she decided that she had had enough. Eris is a goddess of chaos, you know, and so she reached out of our universe and into the chaos outside of our universe. And she pulled in a piece of chaos itself, and she twisted it and she molded it and shaped it until she finally had in her hand a beautiful golden apple. And it was so beautiful and so magical that anyone who laid eyes on it would want it in the worst possible way. Well, Eris withdrew to the shadows of Mount Olympus, and there she waited. Well, a little bit later, after the wedding ended, and the other gods and goddesses came sliding up the rainbow, talking about how wonderful it was, how handsome the groom was, and how beautiful the bride was, and how delicious the food, and what's that? They saw a box lying on the floor of Mount Olympus, and on it was written Calliste, which means for the fairest, or for the most beautiful. Well, Aphrodite picked up the box, and she opened it, and inside she saw the most beautiful golden apple the world had ever known. And oh, she said, "Look, I am the goddess of beauty. Clearly, this beautiful apple is meant for me." But with that, Athena snatched the apple away, and she said, "I am Athena. I have the most beautiful mind on Mount Olympus, for I am the goddess of wisdom, and therefore this apple belongs to me." And then Hera snatched the apple away, and she said, "I am Hera, most powerful of the goddesses on Olympus, and everyone knows that power is beauty, and does anyone have anything to say for that? This apple belongs to me." Well, the three goddesses fell to arguing. "It's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine," until finally Zeus, who was getting a little hungover from the events of the evening, finally said, "Enough! Take the apple down to earth, find a mortal to decide who among you should have it, and leave me in peace." And so the three goddesses slid down the rainbow, still arguing, "It's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine, it's mine." Well, down below on earth, outside the city of Troy, there was a very handsome young prince named Paris. Now, people often think that princes live lives of leisure, but actually, in those days in ancient Greece, princes worked just like everyone else. And in fact, it was this week it was Paris's turn to sit outside the palace, outside the city, with his father's sheep and cows, and watch them graze and make sure they didn't get into trouble. Well, there is nothing more boring, believe me, than watching a bunch of sheep and cows graze on the grass. And Paris was sitting under a tree wishing that anything would happen, when suddenly it did. In a flash of light and a cloud of smoke, there appeared in front of him the three most beautiful women he had ever seen, and Paris fell to his knees. "Oh," and the goddess said, "Yes, Paris, rise, rise." They handed him the apple, and they explained to him what they wanted. Paris looked at the apple. Okay, now here's a question for you. This is for the guys who are watching this. Three very beautiful, extremely powerful women have just asked you to decide which one of them is the most beautiful. What do you do? Yes, you run like crazy, right? Yeah, well, Paris is not as wise as you. And so, therefore, he took the apple and he said, "Oh, for the most beautiful. I can do this. I can do this. So, I think the apple should go to. Ah, wait," said Hera. "Paris, darling, if you give the apple to me, I will make you the most powerful emperor the world has ever known, and mere kings will lay their broken crowns at your feet." "Wow," said Paris. Right, okay. Well then, in that case, I think the apple should go to. Ah, wait," said Athena. "Paris, darling, sweetie, if you give the apple to me, I will make you the most brilliant scholar the world has ever known, and mere emperors will beg to sit at your knee and hear your wisdom." "Well," said Paris, all right then. Uh, in that case, I think the apple should go to. Ah, wait," said Aphrodite, like totally. "Paris, darling, sweetie, baby cakes. If you give the apple to me, I will give you the most beautiful woman in the world to be your wife." All right, ladies and gentlemen, Paris, 19 years old, had a choice between power, wisdom, and a sexy wife. What do you think he chose? Yes, indeed. He chose Aphrodite, and he gave her the apple. Well, the other goddesses, you may imagine, were not very happy about this, and in fact, Hera was winding up to deliver something pretty awful when Athena leaned over and whispered in her ear. And Hera said, "No way!" And Athena said, "Total way." And the two of them linked arms and strolled away laughing, because Athene, goddess of wisdom, had remembered what Aphrodite had forgotten, which was this: the most beautiful woman in the world was Helen of Sparta, and Helen was already married. Well, that evening Paris came back into the city and into the palace, a little dazed from the day, and King Priam, his father, summoned him to the throne room, and he said, "My son, I have good news for you. The hated Spartans The Spartans, whom we have been at war with for generations, have finally agreed to a peace treaty. No more war. War will end. However, I am too old to make the journey across the Aegean in order to go and sign the treaty. So I am sending you and your brother Elos for this. What do you say, son?" And Paris had a chance to get out of this dump for the summer? "Yes, Dad, I'm there." And so it was. Paris and his brother Elos sailed across the Aegean to the city of Sparta. And there the Spartan king Menelaus threw open his palace door and said, "Come in to my palace, my friends, my Trojan friends. Yes, we are friends now. Come in, come in. Oh, and this is my wife, Helen." Well, the moment Paris laid eyes on Helen, and the moment Helen laid eyes on Paris, Aphrodite, who had been waiting for this moment, nudged her son Cupid in the ribs, and he shot his golden arrows of love into Paris's heart and into Helen's heart, so that the moment they saw each other, they fell madly, deeply, and passionately in love. And in fact, all that summer, while Elos worked out the bits of the treaty with King Menelaus, Paris and Helen carried on a mad, tempestuous love affair under the very nose of Menelaus, and he never suspected a thing. Until finally, as summer drew to a close, Paris and Helen decided they couldn't stand it any more. And so, one morning, when King Menelaus rolled over on his bed, expecting to see his beautiful queen, instead he saw a note pinned to the pillow. The note said, "Dear Many, I love Paris in the springtime. Off for Troy. Love, Helen." Well, Menelaus was furious, and Menelaus was fearful. You have to understand, you see, that Menelaus hadn't just lost his wife. Oh no, Menelaus had lost his queen, and this was the problem. You see, Menelaus wasn't a king who had married the beautiful Helen. No, no. Menelaus was a common soldier who had married the queen, which meant that he was king only because he had married Helen. And so without her around, his hold on the throne was shaky indeed. Well, he needed to get Helen back. He needed to get her back now. And so he went to go see his brother Agamemnon, who was king one kingdom over. For, "Brother," he said, "brother, the Trojans have betrayed me. They stole my wife." And Agamemnon said, I told you never to trust those filthy Trojans. But, my brother, I will help you. And so Menelaus sent out notices to all the kings in Greece, because all the kings in Greece owed Menelaus favors, and he said that they were going to war on Troy. And in fact, the legends say that they assembled 1,000 ships there off of the coast of Sparta, ready to go to war against Troy. Well, when Paris got back to Troy with his new wife, he came into the palace, and King Priam said, my son, you've returned, so tell me the good news from the city of Sparta." And Paris said, "Well, Dad, actually, I got married, and this is my wife." And Priam looked at Helen and said, "Isn't that... No!" And then the alarm horns sounded. Da-dun, da-dun. The Greek ships were sailing over the horizon toward the city of Troy. Well, King Priam ordered the gates of Troy slammed shut, and then he sent his men to the battlements, and there they saw 1,000 ships come and beach themselves on the city against the city of Troy, and there they laid siege to the city, and they fought for 10 long years. Now, if you want to see how that story came out, actually, then go look up the Iliad by Homer, the famous Greek poet, and see what happened during the war at the city of Troy. But in the meantime, well, not in the meantime, afterward, I'll tell you how it came out, though. After 10 long years, you see, there was, a stalemate. Neither side could win. Finally, Odysseus, a man named Odysseus, was sitting down by the seaside. Odysseus was a Greek king of a little tiny kingdom called Ithaca off the western coast of Greece. And he was sitting there, wishing he could go home, because he had left his infant son that day 10 years ago. And he was sitting there on the beach carving a wooden statue of a horse, hoping to give it to his son one day, who he now realized was 10 years old and had never laid eyes on his father. And Odysseus thought to himself, horses. Poseidon is the god of horses. He's also the god of this city. It's kind of strange. And then Odysseus got an idea. It was a big idea. It was a huge idea. It was a crazy idea. But he ran off to tell Menelaus and Agamemnon all about it. Well, they thought it was crazy and big and nuts too, but they decided, what did they have to lose? So, the following morning, when the Trojans looked over their battlements down at the battlefield, ready for another day of war, they saw an empty battlefield. There was nothing. And in fact, the only thing on the beach was a giant horse, a wooden horse, 2 stories high. And standing next to it was an old Greek soldier who said, "Mighty Trojans, you win! You are the mightier warriors. We Greeks finally admit it. So they have left this a tribute to your city and gone home and left me to explain it to you. Please don't kill me." Well, the Trojans came out of the city, and they had a look around at this amazing, huge horse. "What do we do with it?" they said. "Let's burn it," said one. No, we have to take it into the city. It's our tribute," said others. And so they did. They hauled the horse into their city, and they closed the gates again, and then they had a huge party, a 10-year-long party. The war was done. They were free. And that night, after everyone had drunken themselves into a drunken stupor, and everyone was lying asleep on the streets and in their beds and on the staircases, a trap door opened in the belly of the horse, and a rope came down. And then from that rope slid a Greek soldier, and then another, and another, and another, one by one, the hundreds of Greek soldiers that were inside the wooden horse. They crept up through the city gate, through the darkened city streets. They snuck up to the gates, and they killed the guards at the gates. And then they flung the gates open and waved a torch that could be seen for miles in the darkness. And the Greek ships that had sailed just past the horizon earlier today saw the signal on the edge of the horizon, and they sailed back up to the beaches of Troy, and then they poured in through the wide open city gates. They drew their swords, and they killed the citizens of Troy. They set fire to the battlements. They took the children and the babies up to the highest, tallest towers of Troy and cast them down to the stones below, and Helen was hauled in chains back to her husband Menelaus. The story doesn't end well. And then, and then, when it was all over, Odysseus went down to the beach for a moment by himself. And he flung his fists up into the air with the city of Troy burning behind him, and he said, "I did it! I did it! I defeated the city of Troy! Me, Odysseus, all by myself! Me! And when that happened, the sea began to bubble and boil in front of Odysseus, and up from the ocean rose the mighty form of Poseidon himself. And Odysseus fell on his face, and Poseidon said, "You mortal fool! Who do you think gave you the idea to use my symbol against my city? Who do you think allowed your soldiers to travel across my ocean to get to my city and destroy it?" And Odysseus said, "You did?" "Too late," said Poseidon. "And so, Odysseus, for your pride, for your arrogance, hear my curse. No matter how hard you try, no matter how hard you struggle, you will never, ever find your way home." And with that, Poseidon sunk beneath the waves. And just at that moment, one of Odysseus's men came trotting up to him and said, "All right, sir, we've destroyed the city and we're ready to go back home." "Home," said Odysseus. "Yes, let's go home." And that is where the next piece of the story begins, and that's called the Odyssey. And it was also written by Homer. And if you want to find out how Odysseus got home, go read it. It's a really wonderful set of stories. And that's our story for the day. I hope that you enjoyed it.